Market Extension here in Rensselaer County, and also have worn a hat as an interior decorator, having my own interior design firm for more than 30 years, and settling into retirement. Not quite there yet, but we've got more days dedicated to time for myself than time for my trade. So anyway, this passion of working with garden art and repurposing items is a passion of mine. And with retirement, I've had more time to do it. So I hope you enjoy what we're going to be talking about. I'm going to show you lots of inspiration. I'm going to show you I'm going to talk about the how-tos of it. And again, what we hope you leave with is lots of ideas for you to go out and make your own garden art. So let's get started. So this talk is going to talk about the repurposing of items, starting with recycling. We have to recycle these days. It's not easy to, doesn't feel good, I should say, to throw things into the landfill. Here you see a collection of galvanized objects just all kind of thrown together. And when I was practicing earlier, I thought, yes, a lot of items thrown together, but now I've broken it apart. The oval, big, long galvanized vessel, that would become a raised garden bed for me. The flower pot over to the lower bottom, I wish I could find my laser, the lower bottom kind of centered. I could hang hummingbird feeders off of that with a flower pot with red flowers in the center. And that could be a multi-feeding station for hummingbirds. And so we've got the old wheelbarrow. I think I'd probably plant that with some posies. Maybe I'd make a fairy garden out of that using miniature plants and miniature pieces. So that's just an idea, looking at items and seeing them in different ways and ways that you can use them in a different form. Reusing items like this boat's certainly not going to float in any body of water that I know of. However, you don't have to end its life and just leave it on the beach for the lichen and whatnot to accumulate. Pull it up and anchor it into your front lawn and plant it with a flower bed. And there you go. Not everybody has a boat in the front yard with flowers, but it does make a nice statement, and it is an interesting piece of art. Again, going back to repurposing, finding new life for items. And here, just a collection of old lamps, some dishes, miscellaneous dishes and planters, some serving pieces, glassware, even furniture, old garden tools. There is so much that can be used and made into garden art. And why you can do that is because I don't think of these pieces that we're going to be talking about as permanent pieces. They're not anything that you're going to be passing down for generation to generation. You're actually making it with thrift store finds and things that you might have thrown away had you not had another use for it. So thinking about it that way, I think of this as temporary art so that you can constantly be coming up with new ideas and replacing things. So ideas are like rabbits. You get a couple and you learn how to handle them, and pretty soon you have a dozen. And that's what I'd like to accomplish tonight, giving you some ideas and the how-tos and how to make them, and then have you go off and come up with all sorts of ideas with things that you found around the house. So let's explore. I've broken it down into categories, starting with glass and ceramic parts that you might find hanging around. And you can create some sparkle and shine by making some flowers. Here are some fancy flowers that have been made using glass pieces. On the left, you've actually got a container that was made or created using old pieces of serving glasses and whatnot, you know, the old hobnail glasses and the colored glass and votive pieces and stacking them in a way that they resemble flowers. Here they were all bracketed on stakes and set into a container, and voila, you don't even have to water these. And think about how pretty they're going to bob when the sun is reflecting on them. On the right is more of a close-up of a flower. Again, you can see that that has been layered from the back saucer with the violets on them to a clear fluted candy dish, to another saucer, to a sherbet bowl or compote, and a votive in the center. And that purple purple compote echoes the colors from the violet on the base and just looks sweet. And the nice thing about white, and we're talking about gardens, is anything white is going to hold up to nighttime. So you get 24 hours of enjoying pieces that you make with clear or white glass. Garden totems is one of my favorite pastimes. I just love making them. No two pieces are alike. It basically is using old, outdated glass parts, vases, bud vases, saucers, whatever, and layering them one on top of the other, gluing the parts together so that they complete themselves, and you have this totem that arises out of your plantings, and very colorful, and just, you know, one of those unique pieces that just says, wow. On the right, there's a collection of totems that have made a little smaller here. These totems, actually, the base of them was made using bud vases. You can see how the bud vases are the bottom piece, and then they are mounted over dowels. Could be a copper tubing, or it could be metal dowels, rebar, any sort of firm support that would hold them up. But those bud vases slip over and give it enough support so that they bounce. They kind of look like little dancers in this garden to me. I'm not sure how you feel about it, but that's how I see them. So how do you do that? How do you make these? Well, you're going to need a few materials, nothing major. First, you're going to need either a silicone 2 clear adhesive or the E6000. Both of these adhesives are rated for high and cold, high and low temperatures. So since you're displaying the art mostly out in your garden, and it's sunny and it's hot and whatnot, glues and adhesives can become pliable and break down. Well, these are rated for temperatures 40 degrees below zero, and I think it goes to 180 on the heat index. And let's hope that we don't get to 180 degrees. Anyway, these are two different items that you're going to need for gluing your parts together, and a lot of the crafts that you use for making garden art can be used glued together using either of these items. If you're using silicone and you're using a lot of it, you can use a caulk gun for your cartridges, but the silicone 2 also does come in tubes, which might be easier for you to work with, and you don't have to learn a new skill. I actually had to take a YouTube class on how to use a caulking gun, and I never knew about backing up the glue. So it was good that we have those tools out there for us. Vinegar and water, because you want your glass to be spectacularly clean, very, very clean. And so vinegar and water is going to take away your watermarks and leave it crystally sparkling. This collection on the right is actually been recently washed and set out to dry in the sun, because you don't want any moisture in these pieces as you're building them together. I think you can see there's some red parts laying on that blanket. They actually made the red garden totem you saw in the previous slide. Now it's in my aunt's garden. Assembly is starting with a very firm totem base. It can be the bud bases if you want to mount it over a dowel, or it can be a very heavy glass. I'm going to be showing you one where I used a heavy ashtray, and heavy bases work well here, and even your microwave plates. So you want something that's going to anchor it and sort of hold it to the ground, so it's not, it's a little more stable and can hold up to the winds and whatnot. So have a stable base, and then use dishes or plates as supports in between. If you look at this one on the right, this is actually the very first garden totem I made. And it went in a silent auction, I think, for Master Gardeners one year. Anyway, I started with a very heavy plate. It was a microwave plate. And then I've used a combination of 2 blue vases and a candle holder in the center. Finished it up with a saucer that holds the top, which I chose to be chose from a glass shade, an actual light fixture, and I just used the glass for that, very Art Deco-y looking. So you want to choose a topper that sort of completes that and finishes it, whether it's like an inverted vase, a little knickknack, if you will, if you have anything like that. Perfume bottles make great toppers. Glass lampshades make great toppers, inverted cups, but you do want to finish it that way. And then have a planned outcome. So that means playing with your flower or playing with your glass and trying it this way and turning it upside down and trying it that way. And once you have an idea of how you want it to come together, then just start setting them aside, because you can't really hold that many pieces up without them toppling like a kind of tumbling down like Humpty Dumpty. So you want to break it down into sections and know the pieces you're gluing together one at a time. So you glue your pieces together, 1 to 2 pieces at a time. And when I join those pieces, I usually use silicone. I actually put the glue around the outside edges, and I fix it to the other piece that's mounting it, and I give it a little turn. That sort of takes all the air bubbles out and sets it so that it's very firm and locked into place. Then let it dry overnight. And you might find that you're adding pieces to it. It might take you 3 or 4 days to build a garden totem, depending on what your days are like. But let them dry completely. And I have to tell you here that caulking silicone can go bad. And I found that when I had pieces that were not drying, and it turned out that you have to really pay attention to the expiration dates on caulking when you're using them. Once you've used it, they'll be fine. But if you're using an outdated silicone, you may have some problems with it curing and taking forever to dry. And again, think about how after you've glued those pieces together, are you going to keep them upright so that they have that stable bonding and can dry properly? So something like the round top there, you know, if you glued it to the saucer, you could do those 2 pieces together and then easily join the saucer to the vase in another round of joining. Here's some more totems, but these are made out of ceramic pieces. Interesting painted saucers and cups and even teapots. And over on the left, actually a little vanity jar, the hobnail vanity jar completes the top here. But I just think they're just so sweet and adorable. And just a little punch of something in your garden. These are easy. I analyzed these and I was like, oh, these just have 3 glue structures. Actually 2. You have the white milk glass bud vase, and then the white milk glass custard cups and candy cups inverted. So you have a glue joint there, bud vase to the custard cup. And then they took a little glass stone and topped the custard cups. But again, this is white that sets itself off beautifully in the garden, and being that they're all clustered together, it makes a sweet little garden escape, if you will. I can see fairies dancing here at night. And these custard glasses merely used a glass drill bit. You can buy them in different thicknesses or different dimensions, diameters, sorry about that. But you can drill through a small hole, and this was assembled by wiring prisms and then bringing the wire through the hole of the custard dish and then just suspending it from a tree branch. But several of them and multiple would make beautiful wind chimes out in your garden. One thing when you're working with glass is you don't want to have them spaced in a way that they could blow into each other, because they will break. And so if you stagger their heights and whatnot so they can blow freely, you can have a lot of fun with pieces like this. Bottles, bottles, bottles. Instead of sending them to the recycling, you can use them for garden art. Here, this tube on the left side merely had holes drilled so that the mouths of the different size bottles could fit in, and then the arch was just inserted into the ground in this garden, and just looks beautiful. And then on the right, an old rake. Who would have thought? An old rake, just throw your bottles right over the top of some of the prongs. And depending on the colors you use, and you could even have fun and spray paint the rake if you'd like. It just depends on if you're looking for a rustic look or a more modern look. But simple. And then the handle of the rake is your mounting stem for your garden art. Here's some more bottle art. The lattice on the left-hand side, the necks of the bottles are simply inserted into the lattice, and then clematis was allowed to grow around it. And I'm just thinking how beautiful this is. The sun catching the wisps of blue, and then the pretty blooms there on the right, the contrast of the Blackeyed Susan vine, just great, just really, really cute. Mason jars. There's got to be 1,000,001 uses for mason jars. I found maybe 1,000,000. I maybe got one more left to go. But here's some lanterns that have been made simply by putting some glass marbles into the bottom and then a little votive with a tea light. And then wire was used to go around the mouths of the jars and to create a hanger so that you could hang them off of shepherd's hooks or tree branches. Or just set them out on tabletops for some evening lights. And these can also be filled with those battery operated 3-foot strands of lighting that are so easy to use these days, and it'll look like fireflies. And if you wanted to decorate it even more, you could apply little glass beads around it. I'm getting too far ahead of myself. This was supposed to be the idea, and I'm showing you more ideas on how to change it. Bird baths and feeders can be made by things that you might have at home. Here you see some bowls, some lampshades, and some lamp bases that have been converted into bird baths. And you know, again, the power of spray paint and different types of vessels that you might be able to use there. You know, your imagination is the only thing standing in your way. So have fun with it. And this simple one on the right, this simple cup and saucer, the cup was just turned on its side and glued together. And the handle makes a perfect little holder for the shepherd's hooks again, or you can tie a ribbon and tie it to a tree branch. And you can fill it with little bird feed if you'd like, or you could even put a tea light in it if you wanted light at night. These make sweet hostess gifts. You could make a bunch of them if you're replacing your china or you've inherited some china, and give them away as needed. So moving away from glass and ceramic, let's talk a little bit about some natural elements, sticks and stones. On the left, you see some very tall cairns made with rocks. Cairn is a process of just stacking rocks. It's supposed to mean good fortune, good luck, and can be a roadmap or a signpost, if you will, in a garden. So your stones can be glued together using a mason caulk, or if you've got somebody that's got a drill that can go through the stone, you can drill them and then mount rebar to make a very sturdy standing totem of the rock. On the right, some wood pieces that have been collected in debris found on the ground and simply painted. Again, remember that these things will not last forever. So what if there's bark on there? You just paint them with a little acrylic paint or spray paint, some whimsical coloring. You can wrap tape around it to make those spiral cuts that you see. It's just doodling, but it's just so colorful. And again, they fit so nicely into the settings of your gardens. More cairns. I was reading an article, I think in this Sunday's Times Union, and there was a story about painting rocks. Someone was having a problem growing Blackeyed Susan, so she used her rock border and painted the Blackeyed Susan so that they were there all year long. So you can paint rocks, and on the right, this is 4 rocks, 3 of which have been painted. Again, they can be glued together with the silicone or the E6000, or if you wish, you can drill through them. I take the easy route though and glue them. Other wood pieces is this fence has been graced with this grow slogan. Basically says it all for those of us that are gardening. Simple dinner plates that have been stenciled with the letters for grow, and then placed in the center of some old frames that are no longer in use. Now they're in use, everything's back, and your bare fence also has a piece of art as well. On the right, this clever little heart was made using old yardsticks. We've all got plenty of yardsticks we accumulate from fairs and home shows and just going into different showrooms and whatnot. And this was just cut into the shape of a heart, but you could do other things too. It was mounted on a piece of slate. You can mount it on slate. You can mount it on an old door panel from a kitchen cabinet if you wish. Again, your imagination, your idea, and then you'll own it. Pallets are another item that has a lot of uses, and thank goodness, because they only make them temporarily to serve as a support for heavy weight. But then they have to find a way to dispose of them. And by using them for objects around the garden, you've actually saved landfill and reuse some lumber that makes you a very special citizen for being conservative like that. Here, this pallet was simply filled with soil, and then the plants were planted between the openings of the, excuse me, those strips, and voila, you have a vertical garden. I'd probably take it a step further and paint the pallet, but I know that within just like 4 weeks, that face of that pallet will be filled by the flowers as they continue to grow. Pine cones are starting to drop around our place. Maybe they're dropping around your place as well, but they too can be recycled into garden art. Here they're just used as a simple compost, but they can be suspended by ribbons. They can be sliced into flowers. They can be dipped into paint. They can be stacked like cairns. So if you've got those pine cones, save them and think about how you might be able to use them in some of your projects. And here's some obelisks made with some very handy reeds and bamboo around. And these are very, very creative and cleverly done. The ones on the left, this combination has combined different woods and different shades of barking and whatnot. What I like is it's so simple. They merely took twine at the top and tied the branches together and then let them spread out on the ground to bring them apart. And these pieces you can use, just let them stand alone as a piece of art, or you can plant them for green beans to climb up, for morning glories, for any sort of vine that you might like to see. And you could always add a little color if you want more interest. To the right, you see this ladder type of trellis, and that was created by taking some branches and cutting them all uniform in size, and then some jute, and just knotting the jute around each ladder rung of the ladder, if you will. And you can see that there are 5 strands of the jute going between all of the branches, and that's for stability so that it can actually be a functional piece of art. The one on the left is a cairn that I actually came across in Vancouver. And as I looked at it, I was like, oh, one day I would love to have something like that in my garden. But to find those uniform rocks, I think I'd need to be closer to a rocky shore. But still, this is easy to create if you go looking for the right pieces and you have the right scale. masonry, caulking, or silicone, you can have a piece like you see here on the left. The right, we can all have. It's merely plastic Christmas ornaments stuck onto the green garden shakes that you can buy in any nursery. They don't have to be green. You can plan to color them any color you want, and you can buy any colored Christmas ornament you want. But those add a pop of color, and they look like their own flower just sitting there. So functional pieces being repurposed into another form, like these pots and pans that you see here, along with a chair. The chair, maybe not stable enough for people to sit on, but it certainly can hold a potted plant. And so this crock filled with the geraniums sitting on the red chair with the red lantern next to the red crock all makes a wonderful vignette and very welcoming little setting at your entryway, in your garden, wherever you'd like to set this up. Other things that can be made, here you see a swing that is made simply by heavy cording and a headboard back. Just cutting that headboard down to the shape that you have here and making a little seat for it, hanging it from a very strong branch. Your grandkids would love you. And the one on the right is my favorite. The bed in the garden, an oversized pallet used, just held up with very heavy jute and an inflatable mattress for those days when you've got a few hours to just go out and lay in the garden. How great is that? I don't want the cold weather to come. And doors. Sometimes we accumulate doors, and doors are hard to fit, new openings and whatnot, so you may find these readily available. The one on the left was outfitted with a window box just below the glass part of the door, and then used as a backdrop in a garden. Almost gives you the idea that you're going to enter a new garden room, and you can see the garden right through the window. So those pieces strategically placed in your gardens are really quite effective and quite interesting. And you're just going to be having people say, where did you get that idea? And I don't want credit for it. I just want you to explore and come up with fun things like this. On the right is a series of doors that have been joined together with hinges so that they could fold them forward and create this little garden room. And then they used another door on the top to add shelter to the space. So again, just placed out there strategically in the garden, little sitting area in your little garden room. I love this chair, and I'm so glad that they didn't paint this, because I love the graining of the wood, the shading of the wood, and the flowers really pop. I looked at this and I was like, oh, there's no seat there. Then the seat has been removed and they put a pot in it. So I made this awful joke and I called it a potty chair. So you don't have to laugh, but you know, I had fun with it. But anyway, it sure is pretty with the impatiens and the, I'm not sure what those flowers are in the back. But anyway, if you've got an old chair sitting around, I've got one sitting in the garden with a pot too. A little silver wrought iron one, just adorable. They can be by your front door, they can be on your sun porch, they can be on your patio. Other things that can be repurposed is old cable rolls can be turned into tables. Here one is being covered with glass parts for a mosaic that I think is going to be very, very creative, because I can see that they're embedding some jewelry pieces. If you look down at the top there, you'll see some metal pieces, and it looks like they're working their design to embed that in. And on the right, a simple little old toolbox, a rusty old toolbox mounted on 2 shelf brackets, mounted to a fence, and then filled with these very whimsical, cute, darling pansies. So easy, sweet, and used again. This one's one of my favorite, and someday I'm going to make this one. I love these drawers on the right. if you've got furniture that you no longer can use for the purposes it was intended, and maybe no one's interested in buying them, take those drawers and stack them as they have here. And you can see by carefully stacking them like to the left, to the right, you get this really nice piece of sculpture, but you also get planting pockets for the plants. So if anybody's got some furniture to donate, I'm looking for drawers. And then they just unified the colors of that with the door, and it just says welcome to me anyway. So another part component in garden art are spears. When we first built our home here, we're up on a hill and it's very windy. So we learned quickly to work with bungee cords and iron furniture, and bowling balls was my first garden art because they would not blow in the wind. Trees have grown and cut down the wind somewhat, but it's still pretty windy up here. But anyway, if you've got a spare, it can be a bowling ball, it can be a lamp shade, it can be an old exercise ball that you have. Anything that's round is good. All you have to do is rough it up a little bit, and in these cases, these are all mosaic patterns. You simply use a tile adhesive to paste onto the surface of your spear, and then you put in the actual pieces of mosaic, whatever it is you're working with, and then grout it afterwards. But you can see there's lots of variety for y'all to have one-of-a-kind pieces there. And they make great gifts too. So if you get into bowling balls and making them into garden arts, you might find people giving you their old bowling balls, and then you'll have some to share with others. More spears. Here on the left, buttons. How many buttons do we receive in our clothing? They've always got a spear or two. And I have to say that I have accumulated a lot more buttons than I have gone looking for just to use on my clothes that they were intended for. So, but this one is just clever by unifying all the colors, working with mostly white and neutral tones and that pearlescent luster, and then adding pearls for design and a few little bits of jewelry. They created these darling little balls. And again, they're white, so they're going to stand out in the evening hours. On the right, these spears were made, one was painted to look like a ladybug. Two of them have glass marbles or glass pieces that you can get in any craft store or dollar store. And the other one is pennies. That one may be a little harder to find pennies these days if we're giving them back to the stores that are having shortages. But if you've got some pennies laying around, you can cover your spears with them, and think about how they're just going to, when the light catches them, how pretty they'll look. Here you see three different glass lampshades, and all of them are suspended in together as one cluster. You can use them as lights, little outdoor pendants, or you could put a small pot in the opening and they could serve as a flower pot, if you will. And you can put tea lights, whatever you fancy. But these are actually held in place with macrame holders, something I'm just starting to explore again, going back to my 70s. But you can make macrame holders, or you can use the neck of the lantern and put wire around it and then suspend your ties so that you can put it up into the trees. Same rules as the other, don't mount them so that they will bang into each other. But how pretty. And now some odd things like these shoes. After a good couple of years of working in the garden, they probably didn't get brought inside once, and look what happened. Well, I think they did it intentionally. However, I think it's darling, and these could be brought in for the winter months, and that would make a nice piece of statement art in your home. I would put it on a boot tray probably, because you do have to water them occasionally, but how cool is that? More lighting ideas. This pretty little chandelier was made from a very inexpensive wrought iron basket, filled with some small jars. They can be votive glasses. They can be small jars that maybe held relishes or mustards. And then they took strands of glass. I'm sure it's not crystal. They took strands of glass and prisms and just suspended them from the various parts of the basket. And voila, you have a very shabby chic chandelier. And on the right, you can see some glass globes that have had lighting, in this case, Christmas tree lights, inserted into them. And then down at the bottom, you can see what they look like in the evening hours. This also would be another good place for those battery operated lights, the fairy lights, I think they're called, in the craft store anyway, because you don't have to worry about electricity, and then you can put them anywhere. Okay, I mentioned that anything is possible with repurposing, and somebody had some old tires and had an idea. And while I think it's very clever, I think I've said all I'm going to say about that. But I do like this guy. He's made up with all different sorts of things. He's got an old oar, an old rake. There's even a bottle cap there, a drapery curtain ring, 2 tools from the garden, and an old piece of terracotta mounted there. But this little guy he's just so sweet and darling, and he says it all. He says that he is the master gardener. If you've got some rickety ladders, yes, ladders hanging around, or other structures that are rather tall, you can add vertical interest to your garden through that height. Every garden needs to have a difference in height, from high to low to medium. And ladders are wonderful because you can paint them. You can allow vines to grow up them. You can display your favorite succulents, your gourds, your pottery. There's a number of ways that you can use them. And on the left, you've got a more contemporary approach done by painting the ladder first. And on the right, a more rustic piece by using it au naturel. An edible garden could be made out of old gutter pieces that maybe you had some left over. But by keeping them up off the ground, you're eliminating all the problems some of us have with hungry deer and rabbits and squirrels and chipmunks. But again, these, you can add your drainage, and just by simply suspending them in those very narrow planters, you will have all the greens and herbs you need for the entire summer. Don't throw away those old bicycle rims. Here you see 3 of them just cleverly mounted against a fence wall. And imagine what that will look like when the vine grows up and works its way through all of the spokes and whatnot. It will be absolutely incredible. And more weird things. On the left, you see actually a punch bowl. It was a $10 punch bowl, cut crystal, actually, punch bowl. You can even see the crack on the left side. That all I did is merely invert it. I turned it upside down, and I had an old planter stand hanging around. So I set the bowl inverted on top of that, and then I underplanted with the Artemisia, silver mound. My idea is that it's going to grow up and look like a wedding gown. I hope that's the idea. And if I'm entertaining and whatnot, I can always fit a potted plant at the top of that, or I could put succulents, grasses, anything I'd like, even candles if that's what I'd like. But when the sun hits that cut glass, spectacular. On the right, using some old moss-encrusted terracotta plants in various sizes, they made this very interesting garden guy, complete with the tools there. My only thought is he looks great in the garden, but gee, it'd be helpful if he could do a little work. All sorts of parts can be repurposed into garden art. Here, this dragonfly was made using some vintage brackets mounted against a baluster with an antique key suspended from the end and another piece of iron on the top. But just that crude little those crude little vintage pieces all assembled together, and it makes a beautiful little dragonfly, or maybe you see an angel in it, but cute. Using an old teapot. Here we had a wind, yes. Anyway, the forks and the silverware and the pot, a wind chime, just by simply drilling a little hole so that you could hang wire or fishing wire, and attaching it to the vessel above, which in this case is a teapot, you have a great little wind chime. And they cleverly added a plant to the top of the pot, which makes it even nicer. And then this ladle on the right-hand side, this big soup ladle, not useful for much else than ladling soups and sauces and whatnot, except for succulents, because succulents don't require that much dirt, they don't require that much water, and so you could easily fill that with a little bit of soil and mount your succulents in. As long as you give them bright light and a little water occasionally, they'll do just fine. Sometimes you have to work with what you have. This makes me smile. I hope it makes you smile. But when we were visiting Italy, we came across this garden folly, if you will, and it looked like the sculpture was removed, and it was such a pretty structure. So I asked my husband if he would fill the drill, and he gladly volunteered to get up there and be my sculpture so that I could take a picture. Thank you, Dawn. Now that you've made all of these, what are you going to do with them? Well, in this picture, you can see that these bicycle wheels were made into flowers and placed at the back of the garden so that it draws your eye across your vista. By planting it further, it gives it acts as a signpost and says, look at me, but at the same time, you take a look at everything that is planted below it. So have fun. These were made into flowers with the bicycle rims that were painted, as well as steel conduit and some tin or wood placed in, made into the shape of leaves to make them look like flowers. So cute. When you're displaying your art, if you've got multiple pieces, grouping emphasizes the area where you're at. On the left, this fallen log that will be, you know, I actually love fallen logs because moss grows on it, lichen grows on it, the ferns pick in the crack, and you see little bugs and critters and whatnot. But these spears placed in multiples around this deteriorating piece of wood just creates a really interesting statement and says, look at me, notice me. On the right, this was actually taken from our garden, and you can see I grouped together several glass spheres. I think they're mercury glass spheres. Just simply putting them at different heights but clustering them together makes a very nice sculpture sitting amongst the white flowers, especially the white delphiniums that are behind them. Also use your art to bring to attention something that is in the moment or up close. So in this case, you've got the plantings, and you've got these cute little vintage plates mounted on a wall with a little garden quote. But it is the chair with the pot that draws the eye into this space and makes you look at the entire vignette that is before you. Your eyes move up to the plates and they move down to the plantings. And just by putting that up close, you have worked your magic in controlling how people view your gardens. If you've got some ugly structures on your neighbor's side, or maybe even in your own property, you can cleverly disguise some of those bare walls by making garden flowers again out of dinnerware, cut glass. I see even a chip and dip server over there. And these were actually mounted and then finished. The stems were made out of tubing or hoses and attached to the wall, and little leaves are merely attached. They're hoses that are bent and attached to the hose to look like leaves, but cute, much more interesting than the white side rails. Think about the texture of your items, and when you put them together, hear the luster of this glass spheres and the glass sticks juxtaposed against the grasses and the small scale of the flowers. It's your yin and your yang. You put them together and they just work magic. And don't forget winter interests. Those blue bottles are not worth much now, but they make a colorful statement in your garden in the summer, especially if you have vining going through it. And in the winter, it too, I'd almost dare say that it's more interesting in the winter, somewhat like our grasses and whatnot that we leave up just for that interest. You have to understand the process in order to know the possibilities, said Bob Timberlake at a conference that I was at one time. And he's so right. So hopefully by me talking about the glues and the drill bits and the staggering and whatnot, we've given you some inspiration to really set your mind on fire. I've got a few more I want to share with you, and then I'm going to actually show you some pieces that I've made recently. Here's another flower made with green cut glass and clear fluted edges of a candy dish and a glass that has been hand painted, mounted together to make a flower. On the right is an old lamp that's been converted into a finial by using some acrylic gems to structure them on the lamp post. And this one I see as a great children's activity. If you've got boots that have been around for a while, or you've got a lot of grandchildren, they grow fast, you can ask for their old boots back and then ask for a grandkid day and let them plant some marigolds to adorn your fence. Or in this case, it's a gate. But how cute is that? And children love doing little activities like this. So think about this. It could even be a soup can that they get to paint before they plant their marigolds. But what fun. Knitting hoops and hula hoops. And even hoses too can be made into circles and then made into interesting abstracts of art to be mounted on a wall or maybe suspended as a chandelier or a kinetic sculpture in the garden. Paint them any way you want, mount them any way you want. Fishing wire is a wonderful tool. You can do a lot of things with fishing wire and a lot of things with glue, as I mentioned. Here's another project. Maybe there's a couple that one enjoys woodworking and the other one enjoys creativity and color. So one of you could be cutting the wood into these different size pieces, and then the creative can take over and stack them into this form and then paint them in these wonderful, delightful colors for a little bit of cheer in your gardens. Here's an old sink, a vintage sink that has been covered with mosaics and given a new life. I'm not sure I'd want to use that sink, but it certainly looks pretty in the garden. I am finishing up. I know we're running a little bit late here. On the left, you've got a sugar bowl, a glass sugar bowl that merely had wire attached to its handles so that you were able to hang it. And the bottom had a fluted glass dish. Those glass dishes you can get in the dollar store. I've done it. But again, you know, just gives you a nice little complete, cute little looking thing. And in multiples, it's even better. On the right, if you've got a glass cutting tool, you can cut your bottles down into different sizes and then use fishing line and poke through, you know, you have to drill a little hole through the glass again, and the fishing line will go through and hold up this interesting mobile. More spears, this time costume jewelry. So if you've got some old costume jewelry around, they too are another item that can be attached to spears and cabinet doors and other things too for garden art. On the right, these were accomplished by using different colored nail polishes. You've got the basic bowling ball on the left, and then you see 3 different stages where they're basically layering nail polish, and it just falls down, and they do 1 coat, let it dry, then they add the next coat, and then they add the next coat. I'm actually got a bowling ball all primed and ready to go to do acrylic pouring with. I've been fascinated by acrylic pouring, and I'm going to do a few of these balls with that method and see how they come out. More sticks, pastels this time, and on the right, some tools that just merely had their handles painted and then set into the garden cleverly. But I can't say enough about these sticks. They just add so much interest and a vertical component to your garden as well. More sticks. And for the silverware that we've collected over the year, silver included, if someone is clever enough to and has the materials to cut the silverware, you can make adorable little flowers and other tools too. Here, these have been the forks and the spoons and the handles have all been cleverly assembled together to make a nice vignette of flowers. Things are pretty, graceful, rich, elegant, handsome, but until they speak to the imagination, not yet beautiful. And that's what you're going to make with it. So that is really it for the presentation part, but I'm going to stop sharing now so that I can show you some garden art, and also, where's my cursor? There you are. Where's my cursor? Show you those pieces. Let's see. Did I do it? Yeah, I did. Okay. All right. Okay. So I'm going to just turn this around. Do I have to share my screen to do this, or can you all see me? Maybe if you put it in speaker.
We can see you. We can see you.
Okay. You can see me. I can't see you.
We can see you.
Okay. Here you see, can you see this whole thing in its entirety?
Yep.
Okay. Here's a garden totem made with this amber ashtray. Haven't smoked since 1985, but they are nice, used to repurpose this way. And I just merely took a wine glass, glued the upside down onto the ashtray. The base of the glass was perfect for holding this candy dish up. And then I had this little knickknack, this darling little Cupid that I picked up at a thrift store. And I thought that it made an adorable little piece of art for the garden. But you know what? It hasn't even made it out of the house. I like it so much, it's sitting on a bathroom vanity. I just saw I have collected a heart-shaped piece of stone here, and I had set it up there. So I had shown you earlier the little bird feeder, and here I have one with a little tea light, nice little pink ribbon, making multiple of those or putting it with bird feeder. Makes a great hostess gift. This too I got at a thrift store. It is a ceramic candy dish, and of course I had to go for the color and whatnot, and I found this plate there as well. So I mounted it upside down so you get that backward facing leaf-like structure on it. And it can be used as two things. It can be used as a bird bath, fill it with water and let the birds play, or I can put a backer on it, which I would use a hockey puck for this, that I drill a hole on for a dowel, and it could be a garden flower in your garden. And lastly is the flower, one flower. This flower, is it centered? Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So same dish as I use for the garden totem first, but you see I put a red votive in the center to complete the flower with a little glass painted saucer. On the back, you can see how it's mounted. I just mounted a hockey puck, and I drilled a hole in the hockey puck with an iron dowel, and that goes right into the garden. as is. And you can cluster several of them together or put them in a container as we talked about, however you care to do that. So that's everything I have to say. I do thank you all for coming. Anybody have questions? You can unmute yourself and talk.
Denise, I have a question about the drawers.
Yes.
Would you have to like line those with something, or would they?
Well, you could line them with weed cloth, but they're old drawers and they're, not going to be around forever. But you could also just set your pots into the drawers if they're the right height, which I often in my planting, I will use a container, a vessel, and then I put that into the decorative container. So
Great, thanks.
any other questions?
Well, it was a lot of great ideas, Denise. You've got us all thinking so much.
Well, we're going to need this when, it's cold and we're inside and, what can we do? We can't see, we can't visit, we can't go out to eat, we can't go to the movies, so we can make garden art.
So there'll be no dishes or plates left in my cabinets.
Well, I have to tell you though, you let the word out that you're doing these things, you'd be surprised how many people want to donate things to you.
That's a good thing to know.
Anyway, thank you everybody for coming, and hope to see you soon.
So many great ideas, Denise. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Very creative.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fantastic.